Okay, so a brand new poll from Sky News and YouGov just landed, and wow, it is sending some serious shockwaves through Australian politics. The numbers we're about to go through suggest a massive and honestly, a pretty unexpected shift in how people are feeling. So let's just dive right into the headline. The whole thing really boils down to one single number that has everyone talking. A figure that for a lot of people just came completely out of nowhere. 27%. Just remember that number. It represents a political dead heat that very, very few people saw coming and is pretty much at the heart of this entire story. I mean, get this. For the first time ever in this poll, One Nation's primary vote has pulled even with the governing Labour Party. Yep, both of them are sitting at 27%. That is a truly remarkable development. And you've got to understand, for the Labour Party, this isn't just some low number. It is the lowest primary vote they have ever recorded in this poll. That makes this a pretty historic and, for them, I'm sure, a deeply worrying data point.
Okay, so beyond that absolutely stunning headline, let's take a closer look at the data. Let's pop the hood and see what's really going on.
So here's the primary vote breakdown. You can see it right there. Labour and One Nation neck and neck at 27%, and then you have the coalition trailing behind at 20%. And when you look at how things shake out in a head-to-head matchup, it really shows how competitive this has become. Look, Labour versus One Nation, it's a super tight 52 to 48% race. That is incredibly close to the traditional race against the coalition, where Labour's ahead 53 to 47. So, of course, this leads to the big question, why? How is this happening right now? Well, the commentators we're looking at point directly to one major overriding issue that seems to be driving all of this. And that huge issue is the energy debate. You see, this poll didn't just ask about who people would vote for. It also dug into what they think about some very specific energy policies. Check out this number, 57%. That's how many Australians in this poll support ramping up domestic gas and oil production. The message here seems pretty loud and clear. A solid majority wants the country to be drilling for more of its own resources. And it's not just talk, either. When you ask about putting serious government money behind this, well, the support is even more obvious. You've got 27% who strongly support, and another 36% who support spending $20 billion on our fuel supplies. Meanwhile, a tiny fraction are opposed. So the bottom line here is pretty clear. When you add it all up, you get a commanding 63% of people backing this kind of major investment in the nation's fuel security. This feeling seems to be a really powerful current running through the country right now. And this public feeling, well, it lines up perfectly with the sharp criticism we're hearing from some commentators. They see a major disconnect between what the people want and what the policy is. You see, their analysis frames this whole situation as a huge, historic mistake. They argue that for decades after World War II, Australia's goal was energy and mineral independence. But over the last 20 or 30 years, that strategic advantage has been, in their words, completely thrown away. And they do not mince words when they talk about the current situation. The image of the Prime Minister traveling to places like Malaysia, Indonesia, and Japan to ask for resources is described in no uncertain terms as demeaning. The real core of their critique is that this isn't just a bad situation. It's an unnecessary one. The feeling is that Australia has the resources it needs right here. And having to go ask other nations for them, well, it's seen as a major loss of national independence. And the criticism gets really specific and really personal. Energy Minister Chris Bowen is called out as, quote, the worst person to be the public face of this policy. They also point to what they call an insane paradox, a resource-rich nation like Australia going to Singapore, a country with no oil of its own, to try and secure fuel supplies. All right, so we've looked at the poll, we've touched on the policy debate, and we've heard the really fierce criticism. So where does this all leave us? What happens next? And that's really the million-dollar question, isn't it? Is this poll just a weird one-off outlier, a temporary blip on the radar, or are we actually seeing the start of a major, fundamental shift in our politics, one that's being driven by these deep-seated worries about energy, self-sufficiency, and national security? That's the huge question this poll forces us all to ask.